Here I'm going to tell you the story of the first massacre of Jews to take place in Poland during the Holocaust. It was not the first massacre to take place. Mass murders had already taken place in Zimnowoda, Parzymiechy, Torzeniec Wyszanów, Katowice, Częstochowa, Bydogoszcz, Złocew and Kajetanowice. These massacres had involved both Jews and non-Jews. However, the mass murder at Krasnosielc was the first mass killing where Jews were singled out for murder. As usual with my videos, I travelled to Krasnosielc to investigate further, and in this video you'll see what Krasnosielc looks like today. The location of the murder, the former synagogue, is still standing, although it is used now for storing agricultural products. Before anyone complains at this, I would point out that the fact that a use for the building was found after the war is the reason why it is still standing. Krasnosielc is located approximately 90 kilometers to the north of Warsaw. In the interwar years, it was around 30 kilometers from the German border in East Prussia. The earliest reference to Krasnosielc goes back to 1374. By the 19th century, there were a lot of small businesses in the town, organised in guilds. In 1860, the owner of the town, Karol Krasiński, opened a cloth factory employing 34 people. There were also 10 other smaller cloth factories. Nonetheless, in Russian-occupied Poland, times were hard and these craft businesses could not support a large population. To make it worse, there were epidemics of typhoid and tuberculosis, and a drought in 1880 caused famine. The majority of the inhabitants were Jewish, who were forced to live in certain streets by the Russian authorities. Because of the difficulties faced in living in Russian Poland, many people chose to emigrate. I've done a video on the border crossing at Iłowo Osada, the largest border crossing between German and Russian territory at the time, a link to which can be found below. Many, if not all of these emigrants would have passed through this border crossing. The most famous inhabitants of Krasnosielc were those that were later to be known as the Warner brothers. Today a park in the central square commemorates them. The father, Benjamin Warner, was born in Krasnosielc. His son, Hirsch, known as Harry, Abraham, known as Albert, and Samuel, known as Sam, were also born in Krasnosielc. The family, like thousands of others, left not only because of the economic situation, but also in fear of the Russian-sponsored pogroms which occurred from time to time and which could occur at any time. The beginning of the 20th century brought population growth to Krasnosielc. In 1910, the town had 2,782 inhabitants. Poland became independent in 1919, but large parts of the country were captured by the Bolsheviks in the Polish-Soviet War, including Krasnosielc, which was briefly occupied. As a result, after the destruction of the Polish-Bolshevik War, the population decreased to 1,842 people. However, people returned after the war, and by 1939 the population of Krasnosielc reached a record number of 3,960 people. Regretfully, it was to return to a number lower than what it had been at the beginning of this century. Krasnosielc lay close to the border with Nazi Germany, and when the war started on the 1st of September 1939, many people fled. Some went south towards Warsaw, whilst others made their way east. On the 4th of September 1939, the Polish army retreated, blowing up the bridge over the Orzec stream. The village was taken over by elements of the Kempf Panzer Division. On the night of the 4th to 5th of September 1939, the bridge was temporarily repaired by German sappers. Before discussing the mass murder that took place in Krasnosielc on the 5th of September 1939, it might be worth looking at two clips that were put out on the German weekly newsreel, which was shown in cinemas.
Jeder an seinem Platze, in Treue zum Führer zusammenzustehen.
The first clip was shown as from the 14th of September 1939 and the second as from the 21st of September 1939. Whereas the killers at Krasnosielc would not have seen either of these propaganda clips, they had probably seen similar clips, and it is worth noting that both preceded items on allegedly how badly ethnic Germans had been treated in Poland. And you will note that these clips are blaming Jews for the condition of Germany in 1918, as well as the destruction of German homes in the current war. In both clips, Jews are blamed for alleged atrocity propaganda, which has been shown in Allied countries.
Auf den Fersen folgen ihnen die deutschen Truppen. Eine der ersten Aufgaben ist die Säuberung der Ortschaften von dem verhetzten polnischen Mob, der von der polnischen Regierung zum hinterhältigen Freischärlerkampf gegen die deutschen Soldaten aufgestachelt wurde.
I would suggest that it was propaganda like this that led to the massacre, and indeed the effects of alleged attacks on the ethnic German population was noted in the subsequent court-martial.
Polnische Juden, die sich in vielen Fällen der Aufhetzung und Anstiftung zum Mord an Deutschen schuldig gemacht haben. Aus diesen Kreisen rekrutierten sich jene Schieber und Verbrecher, die nach 1918 das wehrlose Deutschland überschwemmten und von denen uns die Namen Barmat und Kutiska noch in lebhafter Erinnerung sind. Heute sitzen die Brüder und Söhne dieser Ostjuden in England und Frankreich und hetzen zum Vernichtungskrieg gegen das deutsche Volk.
Die meisten finden ihre Häuser als Trümmerhaufen wieder. In diesem Ort ist nur ein Haus von den Mordbrennern nicht angesteckt worden. Die Synagoge. Jeder Kommentar dazu ist überflüssig. In den Ghettos der besetzten Städte sind die Ostjuden bei bester Laune. Diese Bilder widerlegen schlagend die jüdische Gräuelpropaganda im feindlichen Ausland. Widersetzliche Elemente werden in Lagern zusammengefasst. Zum ersten Mal in ihrem Leben sind sie gezwungen zu arbeiten.
The Panzer Division Kempf, also known as the Panzerverband Ostpreußen, was hastily set up in the run-up to the attack on Poland. It was significantly under strength due to the speed it had been set up, which was in order to place a tank unit in East Prussia. The tank unit came from the 7th Panzer Regiment of the 4th Panzer Brigade under Major General Werner Kempf, which was stationed in Stuttgart, and the numbers had been made up of other army units of the SS Verfügungstruppe, an SS replacement unit. The division thus also served as an experiment to test the interaction between the Wehrmacht, made up of conscripts and professional soldiers, and the SS Verfügungstruppe, made up of Nazi volunteers. The staff arrived at the Starblatt military training area in the district of Preußisch Eylau in East Prussia. Today, the former military area is on the Russian-Polish border and is still used by the Russians for military purposes today. The unit arrived here in July and August 1939. Some parts of it transited across Poland by rail, allegedly to take part in the celebrations for the 25th anniversary of the Battle of Tannenberg. Instead of taking part in these celebrations, the unit was brought into position towards the end of August in the Niedenberg area, today Nijica, opposite the Polish defences at Mława. The unit's task was to support the left wing of the Third Army operating from East Prussia in overcoming the border fortifications and gaining crossings over the Narew and Bug rivers in order to be able to attack the capital Warsaw from the northeast. The division took part in the Battle of Mława but failed to make a breakthrough. It was thus moved further to the east. On the 4th of September 1939, members of the division burned down the synagogue in the town of Prasnich. The following day, the 5th of September 1939, troops from this division looted shops in Krasnosielc. They then organised a large-scale roundup in the town. Several dozen men, both Catholic and Jewish, were detained and forced to work on repairing the bridge. Both during the roundup and while working on the bridge, Jews were treated brutally. The soldiers beat and humiliated them, and there were cases of beards and sidelocks being cut off. Witnesses testified that 2 to 3 elderly Jews were shot on the banks of the Auschwitz River. The soldiers also allegedly threw 1 or 2 Jews into a swamp and then hit them with sticks. In the evening, the Germans herded all the workers into the local synagogue. After some time, however, the Germans separated the Catholics from the Jews and then escorted the former to a building next to the nearby market square. Profiting from the fact that in some cases the Germans couldn't tell who was Jewish and who wasn't, and fearing no good would come of staying, several young Jews managed to escape with the Catholics. Then the soldiers started abusing those Jews who remained, accompanied by mocking shouts such as "Your God is good, pray to your God, may he save you." The detainees were forced to recite prayers. When they tired of this, the soldiers present murdered the Jews. The massacre was led by an SS Storeman from the artillery regiment of the Kempf division, whose surname was Ernst, and a sergeant of the secret field police. They were not the only ones to participate in the crime. Other soldiers of the Wehrmacht and the SS Verfügungstruppe also participated in it. After the victims were murdered, the bodies were thrown into a ditch near the Jewish bathhouse, doused with flammable liquid and set on fire. They were later buried there. A Wehrmacht unit turned up in Krasnosielc just after the murder had taken place. 6 or 7 men managed to survive thanks to their intervention. The paramedic accompanying this unit treated the wounds of the survivors. They were then taken to a military hospital in Allenstein, today Olsztyn, where they were provided with professional medical assistance and treated as one would expect patients to be treated. Once they recovered, they were allowed to return to Poland, choosing to do so to the part of the country that had been occupied by the Soviet Union. The day after the massacre, the 6th of September 1939, 2 of the soldiers deemed responsible for the killings were brought before a court-martial. SS Storeman Ernst was sentenced to 3 years in prison, whilst the sergeant received a 9-year prison sentence with hard labour. The court justified the low sentence of the SS man by stating that the convict was irritated because of the alleged many atrocities committed by Poles against the Volksdeutsch, as well as because of the hostile attitude allegedly shown by the Jews towards the Germans. Moreover, it was concluded that Ernst acted in youthful fervour completely without thinking, and that he was encouraged to commit the crime by a certain non-commissioned officer who handed him a rifle. None of the other participants in the massacre were brought to justice. The trial of the perpetrators of the Krasnosielc massacre was one of 3 cases in which the German military authorities initiated criminal proceedings against soldiers responsible for crimes committed against the Polish civilian population during this campaign. The other 2 court-martials followed killings at Błonie and Konskie. General Georg von Küchler, commander of the German Third Army, which included the Kempf Division, found the sentence ridiculously lenient and took action to resume the proceedings. However, his efforts were blocked by Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler. On the 4th of October 1939, the verdict of the military court was annulled under the general amnesty ordered by Hitler, covering soldiers convicted of crimes committed during the campaign in Poland. However, news of the Krasnosielc massacre got out. American correspondent William L. Shirer claimed that the killing soon became widely known in Berlin. And to get more of his opinions on this, I'm going to suggest that you actually read his book, Berlin Diary. The killing was also noted in the war diary by the Chief of Staff of the Supreme Command of the Land Forces, Oberkommando des Heeres, OKH, General Franz Halder. Küchler allegedly declared that Kempf's SS unit tarnished the honour of the army, although he was later to write in the unit's war diary on the 20th of August 1940, nearly 1 year later, that I stress the need to ensure that all soldiers of the army, especially officers, refrain from any criticism of the struggle with the population being carried out in the general government. For example, the treatment of the Polish minorities, the Jews, and church affairs. The ethnic final solution to this popular struggle, which has been raging on the eastern border for centuries, requires particularly strict measures. Nonetheless, it would seem that in September 1939, that Himmler was very annoyed at his intervention over the killings at Krasnosielc. There was another atrocity committed by the Kempf Panzer Division during the September campaign in Poland. On the 28th of September 1939, hundreds of soldiers from the 2nd Polish Infantry Division surrendered to the division near Zakroczym to the north of Warsaw. Soldiers from the Kempf Panzer Division shot or mistreated many of the prisoners in the town of Zakroczym. Looting and the shooting of civilians also took place. The German soldiers used hand grenades to blow up cellars where some Poles had taken refuge. Others set houses on fire. A report by the Polish Ministry of Defense later stated that 500 Polish soldiers and 100 civilians had been murdered. On the day of the killings at Zakroczym, the 28th of September 1939, all Jews were expelled from Krasnosielc. They were forced to sign a declaration that they were leaving the town voluntarily. The displaced Jews went initially to Różan and Ostrów Mazowiecka, although most were moved on from there too. Some of them left from there for Białystok and other towns in the Soviet-occupied zone. The rest settled in nearby towns north of Warsaw, such as Ciechanów, Maków Mazowiecki, Mława and Węgrów. Of course, almost all of them were later caught up in the Holocaust. On the 5th of June 1996, thanks to the efforts of David Sochar, a commemorative plaque was unveiled at the back of the synagogue in Krasnosielc, commemorating the Jews murdered on the evening of the 5th of September 1939. It included, amongst others, the names of 31 identified victims of the massacre. I hope you found this interesting. I've done a number of videos relating to Nazi crimes in Poland and the beginning of World War II. There's some links below. I upload every Tuesday and every Friday at 2000 hours my time. I'm based in Poland and Germany. I try to be present when videos are premiered, so that's your chance to interact with me and other viewers in real time. In order to know what will be uploaded, then I recommend subscribing. For now, all the best from me.